I would say probably number one takeaway people had from the book from Team Topologies was there is this thing called cognitive load that also applies to teams and help a lot of people kind of have better conversations about why are teams feeling overburdened or why are they slower than you would expect. But it was still just sort of the concept in the book. And in the last 2-3 years, we, together with Dr. Laura Weiss, did all the research, we've been able to actually have a model for what are some of the common drivers of cognitive load on teams. So
abnormal DevOps iterations.
And here we are. The new iteration is with Manuel Pais, who is the co-author of Team Topologies, I would say a seminal book in the DevOps space. So first of all, Manuel, how about you and what are you doing in these days?
Hi, it's a pleasure to be participating. And yes, these days, I would say this year was pretty intense in terms of speaking and workshops. And yes, also we have a couple of products related to Team Topologies. We have an academy with video-based training, and we have been working on a new product called Temperature, which is the objective is to help manage and assess team cognitive load. So that's actually quite exciting for me because it was one of, I would say probably number one takeaway people had from the book from Team Topologies was there is this thing called cognitive load that also applies to teams and help a lot of people kind of have better conversations about why are teams feeling overburdened or why are they slower than you would expect. But it was still just sort of the concept in the book. And in the last 2-3 years, we, together with Dr. Laura Weiss, did all the research, we've been able to actually have a model for what are some of the common drivers of cognitive load on teams. So anyway, that's one of the topics I'm quite excited that we're making progress.
So, if you had to summarize very quickly, what is the book about? Because maybe someone, maybe I don't know who, but maybe there is someone who has not read it and so doesn't know exactly what we are talking about.
Yeah, I would say it's a book about how do we achieve this idea of fast flow of value to our customers by looking at how we organize our what is called team of teams, right? Understanding that is not about if you only focus on individual teams and trying to get them to go faster, deliver faster, you're probably going to have some issues in terms of things like cognitive load, things like a team of usually up to 8-9 people cannot take care of the whole stack, technology stack, life cycle, everything that's required by themselves, right? They're going to need help. So we need to think about team of teams, like the groups of teams that together work well and can go fast and can manage cognitive load across the teams. So that I would say that's the main point. And then I would add, especially for people, I assume a lot of people watching are coming from an engineering background. Effectively, both me and Matthew, the other co-authors, have software engineering background. We're applying principles that are known for a long time for systems and architecture, and we're applying those to teams, right? Trying to have very cohesive units, in this case, the teams that are have clear and responsibilities with a clear boundary, right? So we're not having teams having too many responsibilities grouped together in a sort of ad hoc way. We're talking about then loosely coupling between different teams and different groups of teams, right? The more further away, the more they should be decoupled. And then having interactions that in some cases resemble kind of API-driven interactions when we're talking about things like having X as a service interactions, where if you have some service that is mature enough and easy to understand and consume that can be used by other teams, then that reflects in the actual interaction between those teams, right? You don't need to have a lot of request-based communication, this kind of things from a more traditional view. So it's maybe not that short summary, but this is kind of some of the main things. Yeah.
No, well, it's not. There is a lot in the book, so I guess it's definitely hard to summarize it. So the book has been written some years ago now, so it has passed some time.
5 years.
And I guess over the years also your thought about how to organize teams has evolved, and you added new principles or new ideas. What has not been written in the book, which you would write now, let's say so?
Yes, some new things and some things that maybe we would have stressed more in the book. One of those things is, maybe two of those things are quite important, is as I mentioned, is the book tries to help think about how you organize to achieve fast flow of value to customers. And there's some misunderstanding sometimes of thinking it's fast flow, meaning we just want to deliver more features faster. But in a true DevOps way, what we want is, yes, we do want to accelerate and have, which means we also need technical practices and tools to go fast. But it's not just sort of left to right, push more things out to the systems and the customers, is complete the feedback loop, right? So in DevOps, we talk a lot about feedback loop. And so fast flow means we need to have the information back from the live systems and the customers to understand that this changes we've made, are they helping customers? Are they helping the business or not? What do we need to do different, etc.? So that's one thing that I guess for us, it was very clear that we're talking about fast flow value, but maybe the book could have been clearer about that. And the other main thing is so Team Topology is not promoting big reorganizations. Like when you're trying to change the whole organization, even if you're using the ideas and patterns from Team Topologies, there's a big risk that you're just trying to map what you have today to use the new terminology. And even if you have good intentions, there's a risk if you try to make it this too large reorganization that is just another reorg that doesn't achieve the results that were expected. And so we do talk in the book a lot about taking small steps towards faster flow, thinking about how teams interact, how are they related, etc. But maybe we should have even put that earlier. That's mostly part 3 of the book. Maybe that should have come earlier, just to set the tone that it's not about big reorganizations, it's about making your evolution of your organization much more continuous, right? Almost like, when we talk about continuous delivery, part of the goal was, make things that are painful, like big releases, break them down into small parts that you can actually deploy much more frequently if you have small iterations. And so we're again using that same ideas to the evolution of the organization itself.
All right. So you mentioned a lot the cognitive overload problem with teams, and I guess this is more and more also in bigger companies. But anyway, it doesn't probably depends on the size of the companies, but on the context. What is the reshape? To reduce the cognitive overload as much as possible and let the teams concentrate on what they need to know and do.
Yeah. It's it's a short question that requires a lot of can be a very long answer. But and I would say even in startups, for example, you have teams typically with a lot of cognitive load because people need to be able to do everything, and they're looking for, how do we get product market fit, and how do we get something that's actually people want to pay for, etc. So even in a startup, you can have high cognitive load. It's I think one aspect of this is actually setting expectations around this. So in that context of startup, there's not maybe much you can do, and people have to be also, you need people who have that mindset that we can, I'm going to do whatever is needed to get closer to a product market fit. And that's okay. And it's expected that people and teams have kind of high cognitive load because of that. But you have that expectation. I think in larger companies, often there isn't a good setting of expectations, in the sense of you were asking teams to do more or to go faster, and we're not giving them the appropriate level of support to do that. And so, things slow down, and things, you get into teams that are overloaded. So what you can do is start to have some way of assessing what is the load on teams, not in terms of a 1 to 100 scale or something like that, but actually understanding what are the things and drivers of cognitive load in these teams. That's something, you can use the model we've developed with temperature, or you can have your own sort of internal surveys, but you need to have some idea of, okay, if teams are overloaded, they feel they have too many things and too many stakeholders, what exactly are they feeling that is too much, right? And then I think only after that you can get to the stage where you actually start to balance cognitive load. And sometimes you can actually reduce by automating things, by simplifying processes. But a lot of the time is about finding a better balance, in the sense, for example, teams that should be focusing on the end customer, but they have to worry about a lot of the technical foundational issues around infrastructure or monitoring or things like that, as an example. Then they don't have the capacity to focus on the customer because they already are overloaded, in a way distracted by all this other stuff. But if you have a good platform team or a group of teams that really focus on, hey, let's simplify some of this stuff, let's provide some kind of platform services that are easy to consume, that are a good fit for what our internal product teams need, then we can help them accelerate and reduce cognitive load. So in that way, you're sort of pushing to the platform team the responsibilities and the knowledge around those domains. But for those platform teams, that is their core domain, right? Those are their customers, are the internal teams, and so they're focused on the right thing, and they're helping the product teams focus on the right thing for them, which is more typically aligned to the actual business goals and things you deliver to the customers.
Okay. So in a book, you identify 4 kind of teams, so to say, and in the way they interact, you can build and adapt to different environments, so to say. Does this model fits well? Have you tested it on the battlefield in large companies, very large companies, where there are some kind of issues which, the larger, the bigger, the other kind of issues which are maybe arise in terms of communication, in terms of permissions to do things, and so on.
Yes, so I would say yes. We've seen it work well at medium to large scale. Of course, there are a lot of factors that influence that. I think there needs to be a mindset of, if we want to go for fast flow and we want these teams to be more independent, but at the same time supporting each other, there are some expectations that you need to have in terms of, like I mentioned earlier, we need to be able to change more often the teams, the responsibilities, not drastic changes, but sort of course correcting, and well, maybe this team should not have this responsibility, or maybe we need to split a bigger team into smaller teams because they're all over the place. So there's some expectations that we need to be able to change more often and evolve more frequently the organization. We should expect that if teams are working more independently on different flows of value to customers, there will be some amount of duplication, things that different teams are doing that are quite similar, but we allow that because we want to go fast. And we try to converge at the right time, maybe pushing some things down to a platform. So there are some different sort of consequences of focusing on fast flow that for some large organizations are not very familiar. So there's that kind of work as well, if you like, to be able to take full benefit of Team Topologies. And then the other main thing is, even in large organizations, often they have not clearly identified and mapped the value streams that they have, right? Often things have grown over time, and now you have some big products that do a lot of different things for your customers, and the same product works for very different personas, very different customers, size and industry, etc. And so what we see often is organizations don't have a clear picture of, hey, we are an insurance company, okay, but at the high level, what are kind of our main value streams, and how does that break down to smaller value streams all the way to the teams, right? This kind of alignment all the way from kind of top level strategic goals and business objectives to the team level. And that's where sometimes things get complicated, because if, for example, you won't have what we call stream aligned teams that are aligned to a specific and a small but specific flow of value to some customers. But if the way you organize is that, well, business decides all this, the business stuff, and technology or engineering implements, and so there's a misalignment between those two areas, then it's going to be complicated to be able to say, well, which teams should work on which flows, because there is no definition or understanding of what are those flows. Everything is sort of tangled together on the business side, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Also, one interesting thing, you mention a lot in the book, but also with the temperature, say, how you can call it, anyway, the temperature thing that you were mentioning before, these are
temperature, yes.
Concept of sensing, how the organization sensing, so how teams work. And my question is, what are the actual things that you need to monitor to detect the PKIs? I mean, what the things that make you understand if a team is working well and so on. So, okay, flow is a measure, I guess, measuring the flow, but are there other indicators of how well a team is working and functioning in terms of
Yeah, I think a combination, right? So you have flow metrics that can give you some insights on more, I would say, at an organizational level, are we sort of improving flow or not? So you have some of metrics, for example, flow efficiency, where you're looking at how long does it take, let's say, to get some new feature to customer or a customer base. If it takes 3 months, how much of those 3 months actually were spent working on this feature? Understanding the feature, actually coding or using AI or whatever you need to do to get it actually ready for the customer. Maybe you spent 3 weeks out of the 3 months was actual active work. So flow efficiency highlights that so that you can actually then dig into, okay, if we are fast flow, we would expect the elapsed time to be closer to the time we actually work on it, right? If this is a high priority item or feature, we should have spent 3 weeks working on it, not 3 months overall, right? So flow metrics can help us sort of start identifying, hey, maybe it's because there are some blockers, there's some dependencies between teams. That means we have to wait for other teams to do things for us, or maybe it's some processes that we have to follow that maybe are not uh, adequate for fast flow. It just helps us sort of at the organizational level start to look at what are the bottlenecks. And then I would say at the team service level, so team/service level, obviously a lot of people use the DORA metrics, the accelerate metrics, which I think it's generally a good thing because it provides you sort of a balance between, okay, some metrics that help us assess the velocity and are we able to actually deploy frequently and make changes quickly and fix problems quickly. But it also balances that with the quality of what you're delivering, right? So it's sort of a balanced set of metrics. My only concern that I've seen in some organizations is that if we don't have a good mapping of the teams to the services or streams, we might be doing local optimization where you might see some teams deploy very frequently, but they're deploying small changes that are not valuable to the customer yet, right? Because they depend on other changes from other teams. And so if you would look directly at the metrics for those teams, oh, it looks great. They have a high deployment frequency. But you look at the actual service or product that has value to the customer, and the frequency is is a lot less than that. So I think there is some. I've seen in some cases, I think a bit of I don't know if it's misunderstanding or looking at things not exactly from the best perspective, because the fact that the team has good DORA metrics does not necessarily mean that we're actually going fast in terms of delivering the value to the customer. But in general, it's a balanced set of metrics. And then the last thing is then the cognitive load metrics. So that's all this work we're doing is in a way to be able to. You mentioned organizational sensing, which is a good term I like, because often what happens is we make decisions, we mostly leadership and management, we make decisions assuming they're going to be helpful, right? For example, we introduce some new platform or we change responsibilities of teams, and we might be making those decisions with the best intention, but we don't actually look at, after those decisions were implemented, what happened or not, especially from a cognitive load perspective. So that's what we're trying to do, is give essentially feedback if we're trying to address some of these cognitive load problems with some of these decisions. Was it really helpful or not? So you need to have some way of systematically being able to assess what's happening in the teams in terms of cognitive load. which is maybe not so much directly related to, it is impacts speed as well, but it's more about sustainability almost. Are the teams sustainable in the long run, or are they getting to be overloaded and burned out sometimes?
Right. So you mentioned AI, which is of course the new kid, so cool and fancy to talk about. In some years, some functions within a team, or maybe full teams, do you think they will be replaced by AI agents or something which is not?
I mean, I think, like you said, that there's a lot of hype, and some of it is, I would say, granted, because there are some important, significant progress in some areas. So it's hard to predict what is going to be like the sweet spot of how much does AI help. My prediction, which might be might be as valuable as anyone else. So I don't think we're going to get rid of teams. I think we might have smaller teams perhaps, because we're able to do more of the work with AI help, and there's having agents, AI agents that help us make some decisions and take care of some stuff. That definitely seems likely to become more prevalent, and that might mean maybe we can have a bit smaller teams. But actually, there's an interesting point. Imagine that we get to a point where you can actually create the whole new product in a matter of hours, because you can use AI and you can try out not just new features, but you can try out the whole new product for a few days, or like for a week, and decide, is this worth it or not? Let's get rid of it, because there's no that sunk cost fallacy. Like, we didn't invest millions or whatever to get to this product ready. We invested a few hours because AI can do that. If we get to that point, I would say it becomes even more important, all those aspects of identifying your value streams. How do you differentiate from your competition, right? Because then the cost is no longer in the creation of the product. The cost is in understanding how do you provide things that your customers need, and in ways that are more efficient or cheaper or more valuable to your customers, right? So in that scenario, you need even more teams that are really aligned to the value streams, and you even need more or even better identification of and mapping of your value streams. At least that's how I see it today.
Yeah, it's a moment where we all have predictions to make, but who knows? Anything can happen. So I don't know if you actually do consulting for companies in implementing the theory of the book. If you do, or in case you had to do some kind of consultancy activity like this, what will be your approach? You enter in a company, let's say medium-sized company with providing software services online or whatever. How will you approach the situation? What would
Yeah,
be?
it's interesting, because I used to do more kind of traditional consulting, especially the years after the book came out. And what I realized is that first of all, it became a bit difficult, because I'm I'm doing too many things. So if I'm only doing a few days of consulting, per month, then it's a bit difficult to follow with customer. And the other thing I realized, a lot of the value in those engagements was from an initial kind of assessment, diagnosis of what was happening. So that's the thing I still do. It's more kind of focused on the assessment. But even if it's more of a consulting engagement, I think that you need to do that, right? To understand the things I normally look at is how are your value streams defined? Do you have an actual way of and some approaches to identify value streams, and if, or is it all based on products? So that's the first part that I try to understand, and then also a bit on the technical practices. Obviously, like, do you actually do something like continuous delivery? What kind of technical practices do you follow? Because if we want fast flow but we don't have sort of the foundational technical practices, that's going to be an issue. And then obviously, how do you organize your teams? What are different departments or tribes or whatever you call them? And then I try to go, obviously I do sampling, but I try to talk to as many teams as I can to understand what is the gap between the what's on the paper in terms of what do we do and what teams are really doing and facing, right? Because even if we have the best intention, we say, well, no, we are value stream oriented and we follow Team Topologies, then you always want to see, okay, what's really happening? And I try to understand what processes they use for releasing and getting changes to the customers. And so based on that, I will have some suggestions on how to focus on value streams, and do you actually have platforms that are focused on reducing and managing cognitive load, or are you focused on other things? So that's what I typically do, is give some, if you like, some pointers, some guidelines to, okay, from where you are now, what are the things you need to start focusing on?
Okay, and I guess, as everybody says, most of the times it's not a technological problem, it's a human problem to cope with. And it's not always easy to handle human to human relationships and the introduction of new approaches to also because we are all different, so probably there is not even a single rule. What is your approach in doing this? What can you?
Yeah, it's for sure it's something we need to be mindful of. And it's interesting because just today I was having a chat with Matthew, the other co-author, sort of around topics like this, because, and we have seen some organizations that if you go too fast in terms of, hey, here, like, Team Topology is great, let's just start mapping all our teams to the team types and start creating internal platforms and what have you. But you don't actually have sort of a culture of helping people transition to these new approaches, new ways of organizing, and you are in taking this approach where you tell people, which happened, I think, a lot with Agile, for example. It's like, okay, now you're an Agile team, you just follow this training, and now from next Monday you are working as an Agile team. That's not how things work. And like you said, you need to understand how you get people to transition to different ways of working, and probably it's not going to be helpful if you have this, which I also saw a lot with DevOps. Like, we are going to be DevOps by 2025. What does that even mean? And often what that means is you're setting a cutoff date where you expect everyone to be working in a new way, but you haven't actually understood and analyzed how different people, what are the gaps in understanding, in familiarity with this new way of working. How do you get them on that journey over time? Because it's not, at least for me, Team Topologies is not something you do a reorganization and in 3 months or even 6 months everyone's working in a Team Topologies way is a much more continuous, long-running change where you understand better where, okay, what are the gaps if you really want to have teams that are more stream aligned. How do you know when you need a platform? How do you know if the platform is actually helping reduce cognitive load and not just make a bunch of decisions and say execute and let's go, right? Because that's usually not not a good approach.
You mentioned platforms, and in the book you mention also this concept of Thinnest viable platform, which is quite nice because it reminds the MVP.
Yes.
First of all, I mean, can you describe quickly what you mean by that, and what are, according to you, the pros and cons of approaching the platform problem, so to say, with this thinnest viable platform approach, so to say?
So the thinnest viable platform is obviously inspired by minimum viable product ideas, but it's also putting the focus or the starting point for your internal platforms to be on reducing cognitive load on the product teams or streamline teams, and helping them go faster. So if that's your starting point, then if you build too many things in the platform, if you try to do too much, you're probably not going to be really focused on your internal customer needs, right? So you should build just enough to accelerate and help your internal teams, and not more than that. That's the idea of thinnest viable platform. And obviously use as much as possible third parties and what's available in the industry. Don't reinvent the wheel, those kind of things. But it's putting the focus on our goal as internal platform is to help the internal teams have simpler ways to do things like golden path, simple, easy ways to do what they need to do with the support of the platform, and moving away from what traditionally was more the focus of internal platforms, which is, well, let's manage some shared technology or services in a centralized platform because we want to simplify how we deal with this technology. We want to maybe reduce costs and so on, which are things you can get still, but should not be maybe your starting point, at least not if you want fast flow, and you want to deal with cognitive load problems. It's not about focusing on the technology and what you could do, but focusing on your customers and what you should do because that's what they need.
Right. So, by the way, your take on the DevOps versus platform engineering thing, what is it?
Is that still a thing?
I don't know.
No, but it's. I think there was some marketing involved. I don't think it's maybe not the best approach for me, but from my point of view, because DevOps was and is influential in a lot of my thinking, and I know Matthew's as well, and influenced also a lot of how we came to write about Team Topologies. Before Team Topologies, there was something called DevOps Topologies. It still exists. It's a website, but Team Topologies is sort of the natural evolution and of that. But in terms of platform engineering, I think effectively platform engineering to me is a pattern, if you like, or a set of patterns that are helpful for DevOps because they focus on how do we, what are the things that should be sort of pushed to a platform if it's being provided in a way that's helpful to the teams, right? So it's, I think, as like many people said, it's sort of a one pattern that is helpful for achieving the DevOps sort of goals, if you like. it's not the only thing that's needed. I mean, Patrick Debois also said or wrote, for him, DevOps is whatever you need to do to address with friction between silos in the organization, and Team Topologies is aligned with that, and platform engineering is one of those patterns that can help if done well.
Right. So teams. Now you identify 4 kind of teams. Maybe if you also want to quickly explain what are and what they do. So maybe let's quickly review these 4 types of teams, and then let me know if you think they cover all the possible teams, possible kind of teams. So maybe over time you realize that, oh, maybe there's some kind of hybrid or some kind of other type which could be considered.
Yeah. So the 4 types, it starts with the stream-aligned teams. So these are very similar to what a lot of people call product teams, cross-functional teams that have sort of ideally end-to-end ownership of some service or some part of a product that is valuable to customers. The reason why we call stream-aligned teams is first because of that focus on the value stream aspect. And secondly, even in the case of where you have certain some products, typically products are too big for one team to be fully owning. So you need to find the sort of what we call streams, what are the ways in which we can sort of split or logically split this product into different streams that can evolve more or less independently and provide value to customers. And then we talk about platform teams that we already mentioned. So we've aligned with those ideas of the focus on internal customers, reducing cognitive load, etc. Those are the platform teams, effectively abstracting some lower level complexity for so that the stream-aligned teams have less cognitive load. And then we have enabling teams, which are more focused on skills and skills gaps. So typically small teams of experts in some domain that can bridge the gap. They can help other teams sort of learn about things that they are sort of behind or that they need help with. And finally, we have complicated subsystem teams, which are kind of an exception, but sometimes you have part of the service for the end customers where part of it is some very complicated algorithm or component or something that you actually require a dedicated team to take care of that. We try to avoid it because it can quickly become a bottleneck if many teams use that same complicated subsystem, but it's also not realistic to ask the stream-aligned team to take care of this complicated subsystem that requires a lot of knowledge and focus, and at the same time take care of all the rest that they have to do.
And in your vision, the components of various teams are expected, supposed to move from team to team. How do you envision the perfect way to have these teams over time? The people who work on teams.
I think these 4 types of teams, in a way, can also act as a sort of magnet for different people who have, because we're all different. Some people might be really interested in really the technical details and knowing kind of the lower level kind of details of things, and they might be a better fit for a platform team, for example, although they still need to, you have customers, so you need to to be able to relate to your internal customers. But it's a more kind of typically more technical, in-depth work. Some people might like to mentor and help and train others, so they might be a good fit for enabling teams and so on. So ideally, but again, we come back to the culture of the organization. Is there a culture where people are incentivized to sort of follow what their preferences and have flexibility to move to other teams, or is that all, if it's all kind of power games where at some level managers are looking at how many people are they under them, and that relates to their influence and their benefits, then it's going to be difficult to have this different mindset of people can move around more quickly to the types of teams that they feel are a better fit for them.
Okay. So, Manuel, I would say we can go towards the end of the discussion. Let me ask you two final questions, which are quite generic. First is, who shall I invite to one of the next episodes? Some person you think is good to invite?
If you haven't yet, I mean, many names come to mind, but Suzanne Kaiser, I don't know if you're familiar with her work. She has done an amazing job of bringing together different approaches, in particular team topologies, worldly mapping, and domain-driven design. And I think that's where, as much as I'm proud and happy that Team Topologies has had this success, I think you really get to another level of benefit for the organization when you actually bring together different approaches that are complementary. So she's done a brilliant job. She has a book that will come out about this. I think it's called Architectures for Fast Flow, using this three approaches. And another person, I would suggest Heidi Helfand. She wrote the book Dynamic Reteaming, which also speaks a bit to your last question about how do you evolve teams and over time. And so she has some clear patterns, proven patterns for how we can change, reteam, if you like. So yeah, those two, definitely you won't be disappointed with the
Perfect.
with the
It's
work.
a good suggestion. So, last thing, is there anything that I haven't questioned, asked, but you would have liked to reply to? Any question which or something which you want to talk about?
No, I think you did a pretty good job. I like that question. What things we would have done differently if we had to rewrite the book. I guess often people are asking us now, what is the next book about and when? And I don't have a clear answer, but for me, one of the things I'm very interested in is how to apply the ideas and patterns of team topologies outside of IT, outside of technology. And that's something we start to see already, even in company of lawyers. We've had people interested, like nothing to do with technology, and then in large organizations applying the ideas to other departments that, even to leadership. There's some interesting examples that are coming out of, essentially the ideas are not technology specific, the ideas in team topologies. There's maybe a few things that you would say maybe this is not so applicable outside of technology, but most of it you could say it's applicable, because it's about thinking about who are your customers, how do you improve flow, how do you get less coupling between teams and groups, and so on.
All right. And also, if you allow me, I think as IT guys, we have this mentality of measuring things, trying to improve things, optimizing, which I think is good in general terms for any kind of company. So not to say there is a sort of IT supremacy, because there isn't, but some kind of approach in trying to do things which is typical of IT organization, I think makes sense. or other kind of
Yeah,
project.
and I think actually, I mean, as much as there are these discussions about agile or agile is dead or DevOps is dead, etc. If you look at the last effectively 20, 30 years, a lot of new thinking in terms also organizationally and practices and so on has come from engineering side, to be frank, and not so much from traditional human resources or sort of organizational design type of field.
Right.
So I
Not
think we
only
can be proud of that.
Cool. Manuel, thank you very much for your time. Hope to see you around in some
You're welcome.
conference, and all the best for the future.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.